Dad, Briar, Biffle, and Fritz, and a whole bunch of us. And we go in this place, and this old man leads us back to his office. And the crap he had hanging on the wall. I mean, just everything under the sun when it comes to fishing. And he's got two different peacocks that were within like ounces of the world record. And that was his ambition. He wanted to catch next world record peacock. And right behind his desk, he's got a spear. Got this long spear, and you can tell on the end of that spear, it's dry blood. Everybody else sitting around there shooting breeze, and he's talking to everybody about fishing. And I'm the youngest one of the bunch, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at that spear, and I said, I forget what his name was. I said, all right, I said, everybody else is talking about all this other crap. I said, what did you kill with the spear? He says, what do you mean? I said, there's blood on the end of that spear. I said, you're not fooling me. I don't know what dry blood looks like. I said, you have stabbed something with that. He said, well, I was as far up in the Amazon as you could get. He said, I had traded a whole boatload of stuff to get to go fishing in this one private pond. And he said, when I say private pond, he said, these are the people that still eat white people. He said, they're cannibals and stuff. And he said, so you got to take a whole boatload of goodies so they don't eat you, I said, well, that's a pretty nice fishing spot, I guess, And he said, I almost screwed up. He said, that was one that I almost got in trouble. He pulls into his guide takes him up there, and they do their horse trading. And he said, the white guy has to stay in the boat, not saying nothing. You got to be quiet. Look at them, just let them do their deal. They done their deal and everything. And he said, I'm sitting in the boat, and he said, heck, I just traded a couple $1,000 worth of fishing tackle and and stuff to go fishing. And he says, I happened to make a mistake and say, are there really big ones here? And he said, the chief that they done all the trading with, he looks at him and he jabbers off something, and he said, there's about a 6-year-old kid comes running down to the bank holding this spear. And he says, he jabbers something, and he said, he takes off down the bank, said he runs about 100 yards around the edge of this pond, and he said, throws that spear. And he said, here goes the spear out through the pond. He said, it finally gets over the post bank, the kid goes over and gets it, pulls one out, 30 pounder. World record's only 26. 30 pounder. Comes back over there to the boat. He says, this one big enough? And he says, I believe that'll be fine. He says, how about I trade you another boatload of fish or a boatload of stuff for that fish? He said, nope. He said, we watched them eat it, clean it, eat it, fed them. And he says, what do you take for the spear? And he says, take at least another boatload of stuff. And he said, I traded a whole other boatload of stuff just for that spear. He said, I didn't catch it, but he said, by golly, I got the deal of killing it. But he was in the Fort Worth, the bank, in the original Fort Worth stockyards, the bank was his boot store. And cowboy boots that cost, $3,000 or $4,000, stuff like that. Wow. But he was carrier. We sat there and drank sarsaparillas for an hour and listened to his stories. Forrest was there with us too, and let me tell you something, it doesn't get much better than that to listen to Forrest and them trade stories and stuff. I can tell a story, but them guys are just saying it's awesome. Just listen to them. You guys are saying, yeah. See it to believe it here in a minute. He had spent a day in the boat with him, We whacked him too. That was a fun deal. We caught him. Is that just for the internet?
Yeah.
Because all these people know that.
Yeah, I know.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the Fox 33 seminar room. We're joined with Chevy Team Pro Dion Hibdon. He's been in the game for 18 years, over $1 million in career earnings. I get to work Chevy Pro Night with this guy in the last couple of years, and so it's always enjoyable to get to listen to his stories. And so, it's no different here in the seminar room to get to hear those stories and his experiences fishing professionally and peacock bass stories too. So, gotta love it. So again, thanks for coming out. If you didn't get one of your lures, we've got those back here. Afterwards, you can come and see me and pick that up. And so pass it on over to Mr. Dion Hibdon.
Depends on we ain't got many people. seriously, when I say I came unprepared, I could talk about anything. I done showed you all that. Peacock story was not that demonstration for that, but you know, it's just a good story. So he's from Fort Worth. But we can talk about anything. I am a bass fishing junkie. And when I say that, something new comes out, I've tried it, I know about it, I bought it, and a lot of that stuff sits in my garage. But like I say, if there's something you've heard about or something you guys in specific you want to know about, from equipment, a technique, or anything, heck, I don't care. I mean, we'll talk about anything. Okay? And that's the way we'll do this for the next whatever. You know, I'll answer his question, and if you guys be thinking of one, have something for me. There's no way you can stump me. I can lie to you better than you've ever heard. And if I can't, you'll never know the difference. It'll sound real, I promise. But we actually, you know, we do a lot of that. The weighted jerkbait fishing, where I live on Lake of the Ozarks, is Lake of the Ozarks, Grand Lake, Table Rock. We made it popular. And like I say, the neat thing about it was, you know, 40 years ago was when it really got started in there. The neat thing about it is you don't have to work at it anymore as far as manipulating your baits. Back then, we had to make everything to work, you know, to suspend and everything. You know, probably one of the only things right now with weighted jerkbait fishing that is something that everybody doesn't know. You know, the new baits like the Mega Bass, the new RC sticks, the Spro Big Stick, all of those have different things about them, okay? The Mega Bass and the RC stick do one thing that a Spro Mix Stick or a Rogue don't do, and they float head down, okay? Slightly head down. There is a certain time in the season, early in the season, and when I say that, when the water temperature is at its coldest, I don't care where y'all live, when the water temperature is at its coldest for your area, wherever it may be, okay, when you first start out with weighted jerkbaits, you need to use one that floats straight up and down, okay? It needs to float like this, okay? Because the bulk of the shad haven't started dying, okay? It's got to stay cold for a long time. Those of you that talked about living down here in Texas, that don't ever happen here, okay? You never have a shad kill. In Missouri and some of our parts of the country, after it's cold for a couple months and the water temperature gets down there in the low 30s, then the shad start dying, okay? So therefore, part of this, what I'm going to explain to you, doesn't apply to you all, okay? But the big stick is like a Rogue, like a Smith Quick Rogue, and it floats straight up and down, okay? That's probably the style that you all need to stick with, okay? Because you don't ever have a shad kill. But when it's really cold, water temperatures in the 30s and stuff like that, you want to use your bait that floats like this. That bass has a lot of time to look at. He's not eating very much. His metabolism is very slow in the wintertime. He's eating once, twice a day. But that's why weighted jerkbait works pretty good, because he's eating once or twice a day, but he's eating a bigger offering. You know, he's going to eat a bigger shad. For the most part, 90% of the time, you're imitating a gizzard shad. Okay? If your lake doesn't have gizzard shad, it does. They do. You know, they're the big ones. Okay? It's hard for me to tell them the difference when they're smaller, but the gizzard shads are the ones that get on up there and get bigger. The rest of them are thread fins and stuff like that, and they're the ones that never get over about that big. But a gizzard shad is a big mouthful for a fish. You know, it's like him eating a bluegill. He's only got to eat one or two of those a day and he's happy. And when it's cold like that, that's why the way the jerkbait stuff works, is because they eat those bigger shad. They only eat a couple of them a day. But needless to say, your bait needs to float straight up and down. Okay? When you weight it, if you have to weight it a little bit to make it suspend, some of even the ones that you buy that are supposed to suspend still need a little help. So therefore, you have to either wrap a little lead around the wire. I would rather wrap lead, and when I say this, I'm talking like a lead core solder. the finest you can get. You can go in Bass Pro and they sell it in a fly tying stuff. Okay, it's stuff that the fly tires wrap around their flies to make them sink and stuff. Comes in a little spool, like a spool of thread, only it's lead wire. I prefer to use that other than a suspend-on. Okay, I want to keep my weight off of the bait. Okay, if it's hanging on that hook, it still lets that hook sling around. So it still allows your bait to work properly. Okay? Every piece of lead or something that you add to the actual hard part of the lure will make it sluggish. It won't allow it to kick up on its side when you jerk it and stuff. Okay? So if you put it on the hook actually swings. And it actually can give it a little bit more action. Okay? So and like I say, the Lucky Craft stuff that's supposed to suspend, the Spros, the Rick Clone deals, the Mega Bass, stuff like that. Most of them suspend anyways. Okay, but if they need help, put it on the hook. That stuff, just wrap it real fine around the main shank of the hook. It doesn't cost you missing a fish. Trust me. That makes no difference. But after a couple months of that water being cold, and up home, you start seeing the shad flickering down under the surface. You'll see them flipping and stuff like that. Well, they're dying. Okay, you're starting to have a shad kill. Like I say, odds are down here, water temperature never gets to where it's ever going to happen. Kentucky Lake, it happens. Where you live, it still happens. And that's when I go to, like, the Mega Bass or the Rick Clone stick, because they float down. The last time you see that shad, when he expires, most of the time he'll come to the surface and he'll die. And when he dies, he takes off sinking. When he takes off sinking, he just kind of sinks head down. You would be amazed at the more bites you get. Once they start dying, you start using that jerkbait that floats head down, and it's because the way the weight's on the inside. The weight is it's got an open chamber for one of the big balls in it that makes it rattle. The chamber, when you jerk it, that big ball goes to the front, and so it makes it float head down. Makes all the difference in the world. You will take those ones that float this way, and you will leave them at the house. Once they start dying, they just immediately change, and they go to that one that goes like that. The way our winters have been in the last few years, the winters have been very mild. We haven't had a shad kill in the state of Missouri, not in a couple of years. And it's different, because now I use that one that floats down, and it doesn't really make a difference. You don't catch you catch just many on the other ones, and it's because they're not seeing it. They're not seeing that action. Bass fishing is the really key things that really catch them in a bass tournament. It's going to be something really subtle. 90% of the time, it's going to be some real tiny deal that, some people might not even pick up on. Why do they bite a sinker? Anybody? Everybody's caught one. If you've bass fished ever, you've caught one on sinker, correct? If you've chunked one in the lake, you've caught a fish. Okay? The reason that they bite it is because when it falls, you watch that little tail. That little tail just gives it that. That is imitating. It's floating to the bottom. Most of the time it's floating this way. Think about 90% of stuff he catches out of the water. That's why a fluke catches stuff like that. It's very, very natural. Most of the time on those baits, we overwork them. Okay? But you throw a fluke out there next to something and it just goes floating down through the water column. Guess what? That's the most natural thing that fish can see. Okay? Half time he sees a bluegill standing there, just like that. He might be moving around, but not very much. The only time he moves around really fast and stuff is when he's getting chased, And guess what? You're going to catch him anyways. If he's chasing stuff, you're going to catch him on a pine cone going out there for the most part, But the subtle things is what really separates me catching 20 pounds in a day to me catching 10 pounds in a day, And like I say, just how you work your bait and stuff like that makes a huge difference. But it always seems like it's the subtle things. Just like that bait floating a little bit head down, the rest of it float like that. You can't believe until you see it happen what the difference it makes. I mean, you go from getting 3 or 4 bites a day to catching 30 a day, and catching the big ones. And that's the ones you gotta fish for, you know. I'm not saying I don't like to catch big ones, but or little ones, but I like to catch anything that bites me. But it's amazing how a big bass is triggered by those little tiny things. Those little things where, he knows when that shad is standing there head down, he's dying. He's going to the bottom. He's going to sink to the bottom. Guess what? It's not hard to catch either. Keep one thing in mind about fishing. The bigger a bass gets, the lazier he gets. He is a professional eater. The older he gets, the bigger he gets, he's a professional. Me and you, we know our way around the dang buffet. That's just the way it is. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a professional at that. And it's one of those deals. Well, y'all chuckle and everything. Guess where the biggest bass I can tell you where the biggest bass that you got, everyone sitting in this room was caught. It was the densest cover or the best hiding spot with the most food close to it. You may not have realized that, but if you catch a giant, he's lived a long time, okay? He knows. It's just like deer hunting or anything else. Once they get old and big, they got the best hiding spot and they got the best food source. And if you can get those real close together, that's the perfect spot. How many times have you caught multiple big bass off the same piece of cover? If you catch one this year and you go back 2 years later and I caught a 6-pounder right there. And you catch another one there. And just think about that. That's the perfect spot. If you were down there with him and you swum around with him a day or two, you realize that's the best spot. He doesn't have to chase it as hard or something. There's something that made that a key spot. And like I say, when you go out there and you're fishing down the bank, it's awful easy to just let all that stuff go by, just zip by. Oh yeah, that's a nice looking spot. You pitch over there, cast, and then you go to the next spot. You're just fishing along. The sad part about it is 90% of you only get to fish a couple days a week. So you just want to get out there and catch one, and you're so excited when you do that you just, I caught a 5-pounder today. Well, guess what? If you would slow down and really, what just took place right there, And if you analyze that really good and you break it down, you can catch a whole batch of 5-pounders throughout the day if you just pay attention to what just took place. Did he hit you on the bottom? Was your bait sinking? Was it on the bottom? Was he on the inside of a point? Was he on the outside of a point? Was the wind hitting in there? If there's one thing that we do better than anybody else, we have to be out there day after day. The worst thing that can happen to all these other professionals out here is that I catch a dominant bass if I go to Okeechobee, it doesn't matter. If I go to Okeechobee, a dominant bass is one of them 7-8 pounders. Okay? Here in Texas, a lot of these lakes got big bass in them. The luckiest thing that can happen to you is you catch a big one early in the day. Okay? A big bass will not lie to you. A big bass is not a fluke, ever. If you catch a big one, he's a professional. You just fooled the biggest, the baddest, the smartest. You got it. You fooled him. Okay? Wherever he was standing, whatever he was doing, every giant bass in that lake, and big bass in that lake, is doing something very similar to that. Okay? They're the professionals. Okay? A 2-pounder will lie to you every time. He's just a little kid. Oh, shiny. And he runs over and he eats that. He's like a 4-year-old. Anything that gets his attention. And you catch a lot of them. Okay? He'll lie to you every time. You catch him 2-3-pounder, stuff like that. I pay no attention to him whatsoever. If I'm roaming down the bank and I'm catching 2-pounders, don't mean a thing to me. My whole practice time is spent hustling, trying to catch one big, And a lot of guys, I've said it for years. I might be the worst tournament fisherman ever to live for one reason. I fish for big ones. I chase big ones. I don't like catching them. And when I say that, there's some of these tournaments there. Well, right here on the Red River when I won 13 pounds a day. Well, guess what? That's all it took. That was good enough to beat everybody else. But I fish for nice ones. I look for that big one that's not going to lie to me. And it's going to tell me, okay, here's what they're doing. And if you'll think back to every big bass you've caught, no matter what time of the year, no matter summertime, springtime, wintertime, if you think about it, every big bass you caught on that day was doing real close to the same thing. They were same water depth, they were suspended, they were around brush, something. But you can, when you catch a big one, settle down, just focus. What just took place? Was I moving my bait? Was my bait on the bottom? Just break it down in your head, and trust me, you will have lots more successful days. I mean, of catching big ones, stuff like that. And that's what we try to do. That's one of those things that, most of us work at. I was damn fortunate growing up. I had the best fisherman in the world taking me fishing anytime I wanted to go. Anytime I wanted to go. And still to this day, we'll go out fishing, and he'll explain something to me, and I'm like, oh my God. I've been doing this my whole life, and I never thought about that. And a lot of that's from guiding and stuff. You think about the Hemphill game. As the baddest bunch of bass fishermen on the planet, for one reason: they all guided. When they fished a tournament, they came home, they guided. Okay. Well, that's the most important thing you do when you're guiding. You need to get that person one of them big ones. If your guide party can catch one big one, they'll make a take your stand. What happened the rest of the day? They catch one good one. That's a good day. Everybody's happy. They go home with a picture and a big old fish. Everybody's happy. And like I say, my dad did that for so many years. I think that's why he thinks about that stuff so well, and why that stuff. Everything that happens in bass fishing is just as common sense as it can be. But sometimes you got to think about it. Why did that take place like that? And it's, like I say, it's very easy to see. You just have to kind of break it down in your mind what just took place, It's very good for me because I'm a very simple person. I am not one of these guys that, can run those depth finders like everybody else. I can look at my GPS and tell myself what piece of structure might have one and stuff like that. I can fish deep, and I enjoy doing that. But, figuring that stuff out's the whole key. Just the little tiny things. So I can ramble on all day. Is somebody got a good question? Something on?
Yeah, tell me about your drop shot. How do you tackle it? You use kind of big. You use mono braid. Rod.
All my spinning rods, for the most part, I use braid. I use a 10-pound braid, especially on that type of stuff. And I tie a fluorocarbon leader in it. I tie about a 6-8 foot, depending on the water clarity. I'll tell you why Dad does it, but just don't tell him I told you this. He ties about 10-15 foot of fluorocarbon leader in his, just so he didn't have to retie, If he breaks off 3 or 4 times, he doesn't have to retie his leader to his fluorocarbon. I'm like, Dad, why would you tie all that in there, But the braid really, that's a big deal anymore. And you'll have some of these guys, from out west, they'll tell you they still throw straight fluorocarbon, stuff like that. And I do a little bit. But most of the time, I use that braid, and then I just tie me a fluorocarbon leader in.
What knot?
I tie a double uni knot. You look online, and there's a couple other knots. Anthony Gagliardi's got the best knot, but it takes, everybody in this room would have to kick in a little bit of time to help me tie it. I mean, it takes 47 fingers and 3 days to get it all tied up right. Anthony just goes, it's tight. Oh yeah, I'm not doing that, But a double uni knot holds as good as any of them. I mean, you will break your fluorocarbon before you break that knot, if you tie it right. When you look at it on the Berkeley website, just look at it, do every step they say, and that's as good a knot as you can tie it. And as far as what I use, I'm getting to be a bigger fan of nose hooking stuff. Trust me, they bite it, and it's nothing more than it's loose. When you nose hook that stuff, it's just like the infomercial did. Where they hook that stuff through the nose. Yeah, banjo mint. Guess what? That thing looks awesome in the water. You know why it does? You can do that with any lure pretty much you put on. Hook it through the nose. You hook that stuff through the nose, you come a jerker, it cuts the cat's butt coming out. It looks good. Okay? It's because you hook it through the nose. If you string that hook back through it, kills them. Now there it is. So I'm becoming a lot bigger fan. You know, Aaron, I used to room with Aaron quite a bit when he first come on the scene. You know, we roomed together a little bit. And there's a lot of times he uses an open hook, you know, he nose hooks that stuff. If you're not around anything, like that you're going to get hung up in or something, try a nose hook, because you're going to get more bites. It just makes your bait look better. Even on the little straight worms. I mean, you know, even if you're taking a little robo worm or, you know, a little shaky head worm, straight tail worm, this looks better. I mean, when you shake it, that thing just, you know, it's got a lot more action. You put a hook through it, Texas rig, and it just kind of kills it. Then now, from the hook back, what's got to move, which, you know, works. You know, but it's one of those deals. It's, you know, I like it. But most of the time, I use a little, you know, offset shank, about a 2. You know, if I'm using a 6-inch worm or smaller, you know, I use about a 2. You don't want to get your hook too big. You know, if you get your hook too big, it just, you know, it kind of kills the action a little bit. You know, drop shot's the ultimate rig for fish that aren't biting. You know, and I'm going to go a roundabout way to get to this, so just bear with me. There's 2 places in the lake, 2 places in the water that bass feeds the fish at. 2. That's it. Top of the lake, bottom of the lake. That's it. It's hard for him to catch stuff. Think about everything he chases. Everything he chases, except the crawfish, is pretty damn fast. I mean, like I told you, bigger he gets, fatter he gets, he's just slow. Like me, somebody dragged a cheeseburger down through there, I'd run out of wind before I got to the front door. I'd hope that my friends back there would slam the door shut and I could still catch it. But it's one of those deals. There's only 2 places that they can catch their food good. They drive it to the surface, it can't get wet. You know, they can catch it. It gets disoriented, they can catch it. They trap it on the surface. Or they run it to the bottom, they trap it on the bottom. Okay? When they're not biting, that minnow is in the water, just like this, paddling along. Okay? Everything you throw in the lake doesn't do that. Most everything's got a hook in it, and it sinks this way, sinking down. Think about what a drop shot does. Drop shot pulls your bait right back up there. That's the most natural thing. And that's one of those little tiny subtle things that you don't think about. Okay? You want to know why a shaky head works so good? I'm going to get off that just for a second. You know why shaky head works so good? That jig head makes it stand up like that. When a minnow feeds on the bottom, it stands on the bottom. Its little tail kicks around to hold it down on the bottom so it can pick up that algae off the rocks and stuff. So a shaky head with a straight tail worm, that's as natural as it gets. That's a little minnow standing there feeding on the bottom. And when you shake it and you hold it on the bottom, the little worm standing there just giving it that, but that head is kicking it up, and that little tail standing up like that. One of the best things that will teach you and make you a better bass fisherman, get a fish tank. Own a fish tank. Put your few fish in it, put minnows in it and stuff like that, put your crawfish in it or something like that. When you see how the food works and how the food acts on the bottom, that makes all the difference in the world on how you work your bait. Jig fishing, there is no doubt in my mind why I feel like I'm one of the best jig fishermen that there is out here. I think I can do it with the best of them. And when I say that, not when they're biting. When they're biting, it's just like I told you earlier. I think you throw a pine cone out there and catch one when they're eating. When they're not eating, I think me and my dad's some of the best there is. For one reason. We've paid attention so many days watching a little fat Kentucky in a fish tank eat crawfish off the bottom, stuff like that. 99% of the time, that crawfish is on the bottom, fully attached to the bottom. When it's not, when it floats to the bottom, it just kind of kicks its legs out and floats down real easy. When it hits the bottom, it immediately crawls to some place to hide. God was very cruel to crawfish. Didn't give him very good defenses against the bass. His best one is hiding. He crawls to a rock and he backs up against it, tries to get under it if he can, especially if the water's warm. He gets hidden, okay? You throw your jig out there, 90% of us throw our jig out there. Even if you work it real slow, you raise your rod tip up, take up slow. Raise your rod tip up, take up slow. Guess what you're doing? Pulling your jig off the bottom. Every time you do, you go. Just like that. Guess what? Crawdad don't do that. Now, when they're biting, that's good enough. When they're eating, like I say, you can throw it out there and wind it in. Throw it out there and jerk it around, do stuff. When they're eating, they'll eat it however. even if it looks remotely close to what they want, they'll jump and grab it a lot of times. Okay? When they're not biting, it's a little bit tougher. I throw my jig up there, I reel a reel handle. And what I'm doing is I'm keeping that jig on the bottom. It's crawling along the bottom, real easy. Okay? When I pull it up, oh, I'm up against something. I just kind of give it a little bit of slack, let it set for 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay? Ain't nobody in this room let their jig set on the bottom for 10 seconds. None of them. I promise you. You can't do it. Alright? Because when you touch them reel handles, you're like, oh, wait. You watched the best slow fisherman on the planet, Peter T., my dad, guys like that, the slow fishermen, the guys that really, when it's tough, don't bet against them. About half time they stand there holding on to the rod. Take your hand off that. I don't care what you have to do. Take your hand off that reel. Because if you don't take your hand off that reel, you gotta spin that a little bit. No, leave it set. That's the most natural thing that fish is going to see, is you've just pulled it, tightened it up against a rock or something, or a log, leave it set for a few seconds. When you give it a little bit of slack line, the other only natural thing that crawfish has happens. Okay? You're using a little old light jig for the most part. When it gets tougher, I always try to go lighter, a little bit more natural. But when you let it go slack, and I use a rubber crawdad that I string on the hook. Okay? Everybody know what I mean? Don't just hook it through. I run it up on the hook. Push it on there. So the rubber crawdad is up on the hook. When you stop it and you give it a little bit of slack, guess what? That rubber crawdad, it just lifts up off the bottom just a little bit. When you're a kid catching crawfish out of the creek, what's the last thing he does before you grab a hold of him? Just before you go grab a hold of him, he throws him legs up. That's all he's got. Like I said, God was very mean to crawfish. And what does he know? That doesn't work on a bass. He throws them up in it. But that's the most natural thing. That bass, you got to kind of feature when you're working your bait. Now this will give you nightmares. Has me for my whole life. When I'm working my bait in, I feel like, I think that one's following it at all times. You have to focus and let yourself think, one's after my bait. Okay? So when you pull that up against a rock and you stop it, let it sit there, that fish is swimming there, and you let them claws float up a little bit, you have given him everything he sees that is natural. Okay? I take a little chartreuse marker or an orange marker, put a little color on the tips of my claws. Okay? Does that make a difference? Guess what? You sit down to a plate of food, you look at that plate of food, sometimes you don't stick your fork in it. Sometimes you're like, yeah, something, I'm not sure, I can't identify what's not right about that. Doesn't happen to me very often. But still, I've seen skinny people look at their plates like that, and they think, something's wrong, Don't give that bass a reason not to just, looky there, crawdad. There's not a crawdad on the planet. You can't find one. I've looked at them all over the world. I've found them. Tips of the claws are a different color from the rest of their body. Okay? That's the easiest thing in the world to do. Okay? Put a little bit of color on the end of your pinchers. If you're imitating a crawfish, put a little bit of color on there. I don't care what it is. My favorite jig color is black and blue. Okay? But tips of them claws are blue. They're different. Are the black and blue crawdads? No. Okay? There's some gray ones, but they're not blue. They're not black. But that's for going in dark water. Stuff where you just need a silhouette. You just crawdad and black, blue. There he sees it. It's just that little bit of contrast. Don't give him a reason not to go ahead and pounce on your bait. Make it the right color. Just take an extra second or two. It's not rocket science. You don't have to go to Bass Pro Shop and buy one of them special markers. You can go to Walmart and buy you some Sharpies. You just need a little bit of color. A little orange, a little chartreuse, something like that on the tip of your crawfish. Another big misconception. Now I've sat here and told you all this. I've been letting my jig sit on the bottom for now 10 minutes. Guess what? If you got the patience to let it sit there, guess what? Why don't come and eat it? It's just a matter of time. My dad has proven that to me many, many times. Okay? When my dad figures out how deep they are on a rocky bank or something like that, at home, gets figured out, okay, they're about 6, 7 foot deep. Oh, it's like watching paint dry. I mean, it is. He's miserable to fish with. I love the man with all my heart, but he's miserable to fish with. Once he figures out where they are, don't fish behind him, because you're going to get bored. Simple as that. Because he'll pull that thing down there and he'll think, now, I'm about the right depth right there. And he'll ease it up. Oh, there's a good rock. He might let the thing sit there a minute or two. It's performing. It's doing what it's supposed to do. He's just waiting till one swims by that rock and, look there. Keep one thing in mind. Out of everything that lives and swims in the water, never forget this. A crawfish is his favorite. Hands down. In my fish tank, when I was a kid growing up, we put shad in there. We put minnows in there of every kind. Okay? Those minnows and stuff, sometimes they might live in there for a day till they get hungry, and they eat them, till they get hungry and eat them. You throw a crawdad in there, lasts about 10 seconds. Most of the time not that. Okay? Even if he's not hungry, he puts it in there. If you drop that crawdad in there and he don't get hit immediately, he's eaten. One of them eats it. Okay? Most of the time, if you put a crawdad in and you want a crawdad, watch a crawdad, see how he reacts on the bottom, stuff like that. You have to take the bass out. We had another tank that every now and then we'd take them out, we'd watch crawdads for a little bit, then we put them back in, they'd eat them. And it was, kind of a bad deal. But trust me, and that told me one thing. That's his favorite. And it ain't just in the Ozarks, it's everywhere. I live in the Ozarks. It's everywhere. Any lake you go to, Lake Okeechobee, they love them little grass shrimp and stuff. They don't have crawfish as much as they do those grass shrimp. Same situation. I'm going to go a little bit over my head here. A crustacean. Glad I got that out right. I could have said spider or something. But anyways, those are their favorites for some reason. I mean, that's what they would just as soon eat those. I've had them both in the tank, have a whole school of little old shad in there and little minnows in there, drop a crawfish in there. I had a Kentucky one time that he was mean. We finally had to throw him back in the lake. But he was about that long, had him in there with about a 3-pound bass. And until he was done eating, that largemouth didn't get to eat. He ruled the tank. He was just that mean. And, he would scarf up everything. You throw a crawfish in there, and I have seen him spit out a whole mouthful of shad. Just poof, blow him out. Run over there, eat that crawdad, turn around and look at that largemouth like, what'd you think of that? And it's hilarious. I mean, but they prefer those. That's why a jig will catch one about any time you throw it, But it's it's just a good, good thing to keep in mind. Anywhere you go, they'll eat a crawfish. Simple as that. And like I say, just think about what you do with your bait. Think about what that fish sees. What time is it?
About 3:40.
3:40? Okay, I got about 5 more minutes. I got to go help with the weigh-in. Hank doesn't need my help, but I'm going to go there for a few minutes anyways. If I don't, I get fired and stuff like that. Anyways, anybody got another question? Go ahead.
What techniques you prefer on lakes with lots of hydro?
Lakes with lots of hydro. Fish around the hydro. And I'm not. If there's vegetation in your lake, that's where they live. Okay? Very few exceptions to that rule. If it's green vegetation, that's where the bulk of the bass are going to live.
What lures you have the most success with?
Most of the time I try to get down through it. In the mornings, I'll take off with a topwater along the edges of it and just take off fishing. Sometimes you won't catch them, but they'll come up and give away their position, And like I said, 90% of the time I'll take a spook and just head out down the outside edge of the grass just fishing. You get a blow up, mark it on your GPS because that's kind of where they live. That's a neat thing about grass also. You catch very few random fish in grass. Normally if you catch one, there's a little water right there. There'll be a little pocket under there or something, a cavern that's holding several bass. But a lot of times you'll catch one of them that'll come out and chase a topwater or something like that. And like I say, that kind of gives away where they're at. So I'd start out with a topwater. I throw worm along the edge of the grass too. Swim worm, swim a jig, stuff like that along the edge of it. They eat a lot of bluegill. A lot of bluegill get eaten around grass because those bluegill hide in that grass to, so they're not out in the open, getting eat out in the open. So they do a lot of hiding around that grass. So they use a lot of bluegill-oriented baits, stuff that looks like a bluegill, beaver type stuff. Everybody wonders beaver's bluegill. It's a little bit bluegill, is all it is. So I do a lot of green pumpkin stuff like that.
Move fast.
I move fast till I have one bite, and then I'll slow down. When me and him fish together up on Lake Champlain, we just thump their butts out of the grass, flipping a jig down in the grass. Okay. I can't remember. Champlain's a little bit different situation because it's awesome. They live everywhere there. But I can't remember if I started out with a spinnerbait or a fluke or something. I try to find them. A lot of times I try to find them. And you might not catch many fish on it, but a lot of times in the morning there's one right there. And I cast around a little bit for the first hour or so. Like I say, Champlain's a little bit different because I really knew where they were at. I can pull and just start dropping in there and catch them. So there's not a lot of searching. But when I search around with something that, you might not catch them, but they'll come up and look at it. And then when I slow down, I take bluegill-oriented baits, flip a big jig down through it. High drill is pretty dense, so therefore a lot of times you have to go to Texas rig stuff. But a lot of times I'll go to Texas rig stuff with big sink, 1 ounce, stuff like that. You're getting a lot of drag on your bait. So don't think that 1 ounce or ounce and a quarter bait is just zipping to the bottom, because it's not. Because you got a lot of drag on your line when you put it through that grass. But it takes a big sinker a lot of times. Beaver type baits are good. Straight old crawdad. I flip a straight crawdad a lot when I'm flipping. Just because a lot of times when you're out there fishing, you pull up a big old mess of grass or something, pick it up and look at it. About half the time there's crawfish the crawdads hang on that grass a lot of times. So I do a lot of that with a Texas rig crawdad and stuff, down through the hydro. But once you find them, then flip something down through. So dark colors. Either bluegill colors or darker colors. Because think about where you're putting your bait. You're putting your bait in some really dark areas. So suspended fish, just keep one thing in mind. You're having a hard time keeping your bait in front of it. It's flowing past him. If you're going to throw a crankbait, keep it above him. Make sure it's dipping down. If they're 15 foot deep, throw a bait that runs 12 foot deep. He wants to come up. He wants to chase it to the top. Okay? If he's suspended, he wants to go up. When a bass suspends, when you catch a bass, I'm going to tell you something that's pretty dang critical right here. You catch a bass, the first thing I do when I catch a bass out deep, if I wasn't paying attention, and I just, I got him, and I catch him, first thing I do is I pop him out of the water and I look at his eyeballs. If he's feeding above him, his eyeballs will kind of be canted like he's looking up, almost kind of like he's cross-eyed. But they'll be looking up. Next time you catch one suspended, as soon as you pull him out of the water, look at him, because his eyes don't move. Okay, his eyes are basically stationary in his body. But if he's feeding above him, his eyes will be looking up, kind of like he's looking up. And he can't adjust that fast. When you set the hook and reel him up, throw him in the boat, just jump and grab him, look at his eyeballs. And if he's there canted up, he's feeding up, he's wanting to come up. So top water, stuff like that, to bring him up. Okay? Same way when he's feeding on the bottom. If he's feeding on the bottom, guess what? Them little eyeballs be canted down. Trust me. Don't believe me now. Wait till you catch one. Next time you catch one, go. And trust me, my dad's like, where was that one at? I said, I have no idea. He said, well, let me look at it. And I'm like, what? And he looks at it and says, oh, it's suspended. And he didn't tell me for a long time. Frustrated. I'm like, what are you looking at? And then he shows me and then explains it on your face. Once you see it, next time you see it, oh, yeah, that's what it is. That's something to pay attention to in that grass. A lot of times in that grass, they ain't near the bottom. They're up in the top they're just under the canopy of it, where it's dense. When you're fishing grass, think of timber. You're in the woods. You're flipping through the leaves of that tree, coming down to the stalks. Okay? That's what you need to keep in mind when you're flipping that grass in that high growth. Okay. All right. I got a call today. I got to catch a bus. You betcha.
All right, give a round of applause for him. Chevy Pro Dion Hibdon. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for coming out, everybody. The weigh-in will be starting at 5 o'clock at the CenturyLink Center. If you took a shuttle bus, if you parked there and took a shuttle bus over here, the shuttles can be found right out here outside the main doors. We'll open the expo tomorrow at 10. We'll have a lot more seminars.